Hello, hello, hello. Hello. Hello, can you all hear me? Good morning. Can you all hear me, ma? Hello, can you all hear me? Okay. Actually, I have a problem in my PPT is not getting uploaded to the computer. I will send the PPT, nothing to worry. It is ready with me. So can I begin the class? I've asked for admin to help me. Let me see if they help, if they are able to project my PPT. Okay. Can somebody just acknowledge yes or no? Hello? Hello? Can somebody unmute and just say yes or no, ma? Dipti, are you there? Manimala, can you hear me? Can you unmute and just tell me yes or no, ma? Hello? Okay, so good morning, students. My name is Dr. Angela, and today I'm going to take the session for you on cognitive behavioral processes. Okay, so this is the first year BA semester 2. I will send the PowerPoint to you all. I will get it uploaded. So because I'm having some technical glitches, I will just continue with my audio and video. Okay. So what is the purpose of this session today? The objectives of this paper is to define learning and describe its nature, discuss various theories of learning, and differentiate between theories of learning, explain various concepts of related to learning, right? So when you're talking about cognitive and behaviorism, cognitive is nothing but thought processes. We have to just basically understand. Okay. Life involves a sequence of acts related to learning and learning of actions, ideas, feelings, and attitude. According to J.B. Watson, he was first to study how the process of learning affects our behavior, and he formed the school of thought known as behaviorism. According to behaviorism, only observable behaviors are worthy of research, since a person's mood or thoughts are too subjective. Okay, so let us understand what is learning. Let us take the definition of learning. Learning is defined as any relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a result of practice and experience. As we learn, we alter the way we perceive our environment, the way we interpret the incoming stimuli, and therefore the way we interact. Learning may be described as a process by which an individual gains knowledge or acquires a new pattern or behavior. It refers to change brought about in the existing patterns of behavior of knowledge, which becomes relatively enduring through practice. So, we learn as we move on in life. We learn through experiences and we learn through practices. Like if we adopt some behavior, when we continue to practice it, we end up learning, right? Okay, so what is the nature of learning? Now, we may think that learning means it is only sitting in the classroom or going to school or college, and only in the environment of school, or institutions. But learning is much broader. Learning is not just confined to education, but we learn not just in school, but a learning is a continuous process and it is a complex process which involves sensations and perception. Learning results in change, gaining of knowledge or stabilization or change or modification of behavior. Okay, so this is all about learning, right? We need to understand and be clear about what learning is all about. Okay, now in learning, there are many theories, especially in psychology, that we get to learn, right? One of the most important, they have listed in our syllabus, we have been listed some few of the theories of learning. One is the classical conditioning by Ivan Pavlov. The second is the trial and error by E.L. Thorndike. The third one is the operant conditioning by B.F. Skinner. The fourth one is insight learning by Wolfgang Kohler. The fifth one is observational learning by Albert Bandura. And the last one is cognitive learning by Edward Tolman. Now let's look at each of these learning that is part of our syllabus, right? Now Ivan Pavlov was a Russian psychologist who discovered classical conditioning, right, in the salivation responses of dogs. His investigations focused on animals' orientations of response to new stimuli. His work has come to be known as classical conditioning after he discovered by accident while investigating the digestive process. Right? Pavlov inserted tubes into the salivary glands of dogs in order to measure the amount of saliva they produced when they were shown meat powder. In the midst of the simple experiment, Pavlov noticed that the dog salivated even before the meat powder was in its mouth. In fact, the very mere sight of food and even the foodstuff of the experimenter made the dog's mouth water. This aroused Pavlov's curiosity, right? So, Pavlov's curiosity made him to experiment using a bell for the stimulus. So, according to Pavlov's, classical conditioning can be categorized into four basic elements. That is unconditional stimulus, UCS, what we call it, unconditioned response, UCR, what we call it, and conditional stimulus, that is CS, and conditional response, that is CR. Okay, so let's look at each one. So before conditioning, what happens? Pavlov, he has the bell, right? And there is food. There is food and there is salivation. The dog sees the food and automatically there is salivation. Okay, this is before conditioning. Now, during the conditioning, what happened? There is bell followed by unconditional stimulus, that is the food, and unconditional response, that is the salivation. And after conditioning, what happens? There is only bell and salivation. So what happens? The dog gets used to, see, once they start looking at the food, automatically the mouth salivates, right? The saliva comes up because of the food. So Pavlov tried this experiment with dogs, right? So by ringing the bell, so the moment the dog saw the person taking the food, their mouth water already salivated, right? So repeatedly, when this kind of things are conducted, what happens? The dogs get conditioned. So sometimes even there is no food, automatically just when there is a bell, right? The dog associates the bell with the salivation. So even without the condition, even without the food that is there, just by listening to the bell, the dog start salivation. So that is what is called conditioning. Like for example, in our lives, anything that we repeatedly do, right, we get conditioned to understand that this is how, this is how the way it works in our lives, any particular habit or so. So something, even auto response, even without that, automatically our brain starts stimulating and we start responding. Okay, so that is conditional response. So we are all victims of conditional responses, right? Okay, so this is a very important theory that Ivan Pavlov has contributed to psychology. Okay, that is classical conditioning. Classical conditioning related to how the dog is conditioned to respond to a particular conditioning. That, whether it sees the meat powder, right, and then he adds the bell to it, right, and then when he removes the meat powder and only when he uses the bell, still the dog starts salivating. Okay, so this is about classical conditioning. The second theory that we have to study here is a trial and error. Now, trial and error. This is E.L. Thorndike, an American psychologist who set up a puzzle box as an example of instrumental conditioning. Right? An animal makes some response. If it is rewarded, the response is learned. If the response is not rewarded, it gradually disappears. Okay. So the entire experiment here was based on animals being placed into these boxes where they could only escape in a particular manner. Thorndike placed a hungry cat into the box and began observing its behavior as it tried to escape and obtain some food. He noticed that the cat obtained the food only by trial and error. So on successive attempts, the trial and error behavior decreased and the cat would escape quickly, right? So Thorndike suggested that certain stimuli and responses become connected and dissociated from each other according to his law of effect. This evaluation led him to conclude that animals learn. Evaluation led to him conclude that animals learn solely by trial and error or reward and punishment. Okay, so this is his contribution. And the third theory that we are learning here is operant conditioning. This is by B.F. Skinner. Okay, so let me look at it. Yeah. Now, B.F. Skinner proposed the learning theory. He devised a Skinner box, which provides learning situations for rats. Right? Skinner placed a hungry rat in the box and observed its activities. The rat began to explore and finally hit the bar, and the food pellet dropped into the cup. The food strengthened or reinforced the bar pressing responses. Skinner used this experiment to explain the fundamental principle involved in most learning activities. This behavior is said to be operant because the animal performs an operand which releases food. Right? So there are also other concepts. Okay. So let me just check if the admin has responded. I asked them to help me with the PowerPoint. Okay. No response. Okay, but don't worry about the PowerPoint. I will get it uploaded because it is ready with me. Okay, what are the other concepts related to conditioning? The other concepts related to conditioning are extension, spontaneous recovery, generalization, response generalization, discrimination, higher order conditioning, and stimulus relation. Okay, so let's look at each one of them. Right, extension. Now, what is this extension? What do we understand when we say extension? Extension refers to the term, right, of disappearance of a previously learned behavior. When the behavior is not reinforced, right, when we are not able to repeat that particular behavior, what will happen? Automatically, we'll forget and that will just disappear, right? So in classical conditioning, when a conditional stimulus is presented alone without unconditional stimulus, the conditioned response will eventually cease. For example, in Pavlov's experiment, the dog was conditioned to salivate to the sound of the bell. When the bell was repeatedly presented without the presentation of the food, the salivation response eventually became extinct. In operant conditioning, extent occurs when a response is no longer reinforced. Now you see how Ivan Pavlov is using the bell, right, along with the food so that the dog salivate. Now repeatedly using the bell without the food, no, what will happen? The dogs get to understand there is no food, right? And then slowly the behavior gets extent, right? Once it will run hearing the bell, twice it will run. But then when it says there is no food, the behavior will start extincting, right? So that is what is all about extinction. The second one, spontaneous recovery. What is spontaneous recovery? In experiment on classical conditioning, Pavlov found that when extinction occurs, it does not mean that the subject returns to their unconditional state. When several hours or even a day pass after a response has been exchanged, we can see the spontaneous recovery of the response occurs. Thus, spontaneous recovery refers to sudden reappearance of a previously extinct response. So you see, when the dog stopped responding, like when we say the behavior, when they stop, repeating the same behavior, and suddenly they realize that there is no food here, they stop, they become extinct. But for spontaneous recovery, that doesn't mean that they have forgotten. So this behavior can again reoccur, it can again reappear, right? Again, when they start with, if you take the example of Pavlov, again, if he uses the bell and if he uses the foot, the behavior can start reappearing. Okay. The third one is generalization. Now, what is generalization? The phenomena of generalization includes stimulus generalization and response generalization. Pavlov found that when a conditioned response to a specific stimuli has been established, stimuli similar to the conditioned response, though identical, could provoke a conditioned response without earlier exposure. For example, a dog conditioned to the sound of a bell might also respond to the bell of a different tone or a buzzer, right? So when we say general symbolization, see, Pavlov used a particular kind of a bell so that the dog responds and, salivates around the food. Now, what happens? This conditional response that is there of this particular sound of the bell can also be replaced by a buzzer. That means they can use any other sound which sounds like a bell, right? But the sound can be a different. So it can be a buzzer, it can be something else, the sound. But still there will be a generalization of the response. Okay. So the skill one learns when playing cricket or maybe generalized to baseball. One should note that both games are similar if not complex. Okay. So that is all about generalization. Fourth one, what is response generalization? The phenomena of response generalization can be seen in both types of conditioning. An animal trained to press the lever with one foot will use another foot or its head to press the lever in case the foot used in the earlier training has been tied up. Okay. So same thing when you look at the animal, in order to attain foot, they may press the pellet, right? They may press the lever to get that food in one leg. For suppose they are not able to use the leg, he will use another leg. And as rightly pointed out, if they are not able to use both the leg, they may even use their head because they know that they know that the lever works only by pressing. So that is response generalization. They can use any other way to be able to get the response. Yeah. Number 5, discrimination. What is discrimination? Discrimination is a process of learning to distinguish between various stimuli and responding to a specific stimulus or event is referred to as discrimination. In classical conditioning, the dogs were trained to discriminate between various kinds of sounds. In operant conditioning, discrimination was taught by rewarding certain responses. Okay. So here we see how various kinds of responses have been, how it is, the dogs were trained to discriminate between various kinds of sounds. In operant conditioning, discrimination was taught. Like, when you do something, when you get a reward, like, that becomes a part of the conditioning and that could be one of the response. Okay. The next, higher order conditioning. What is higher order conditioning? In classical conditioning, higher order conditioning or second order conditioning is a form of learning in which stimulus is first made of meaningful or consequential through an initial step of learning. And then the stimulus is used as a basis for learning about some new stimuli. The animals might first learn to associate the bell with the food. That is the first order conditioning. And then learn to associate a light with the bell. That is the higher order conditioning, right? Or the second order conditioning. And this can be carried on at the fourth and the fifth level also, right? So just as Ivan Pavlov used the bell, so along with the bell, if he starts using light, maybe a bright light, or if he starts using any other sound along with it, right? That comes to a higher order conditioning. And the more they keep adding things to, along with the bell, the light, and other things, it goes on as the third or the fourth level of conditioning. Okay. So number 7, stimulus response relationship. What is the stimulus response relation? Stimulus response theories are central to principles of conditioning. They are based on the assumption that human behavior is learned, right? All our behaviors are a learned behavior, which can also be unlearned. Thorndike postulated the law of effect, which stated that those behavioral responses are that were most closely followed by satisfactory real were more likely to become established as a pattern to reoccur to the response of the same stimulus. For example, when repeatedly, if the same kind of behavior is used, right, then what happens? That becomes a kind of a stimulus response relationship. Like how the dog, when they look at the food, salivated, right? No, but the dog respond to the stimulus. Stimulus is a mouth watering. That is a salivation, right? So when repeatedly done, this will be, what will happen? The stimulus response relationship is established. Number 8, the concept of reinforcement. Now, what is the concept of reinforcement? Reinforcement is the key element in B.F. Skinner's stimulus response theory. A reinforcer is anything which strengthens the desired response. It could be a verbal praise or a feeling of increased accomplishment or satisfaction. The theory can also covers negative reinforcers, right? Any stimulus that results in increased frequency of a response when it is withdrawn. One of the distinct aspects of Skinner's theory is that it attempted to provide behavioral explanations of a broad range of cognitive phenomena. For example, Skinner explained drive, that is motivation, in terms of deprivation and reinforcement schedule, and type of reinforcement and schedules of reinforcement will be explained. Okay. So the concept of reinforcement in a simple language, if you want to understand, like for example, if you do something good, like, you score well. So you are being rewarded for that good behavior. Like maybe your parent or somebody said, very good, very well done. So what happened? That behavior of wanting to learn, the behavior of wanting to score well will get reinforced. Same thing with the child. If the child is doing the homework regularly, and if you give the something to the child as an incentive, right? And the child feels very happy. Okay, then when I'm doing this, so that habit get reinforced. Okay. So Skinner talks about positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement also, right? In the following chapters, we will be able to study in detail. At the moment, I only focused on the positive reinforcement. That is, when a good behavior is appreciated, right? And the person or the child feels reinforced to repeat the same kind of a behavior. The next theory is the insight learning, right? That is the Koller's insight learning. Now, Wolfgang Koller was one of the founders of the Gestalt psychology, along with Max Richtner and Kurt Popper. Koller questioned Thorndike's conclusion that animals learn through association between stimuli and response. That becomes stronger due to reinforcement. Koller began an experiment by placing a sultan, a hungry ape, in an enclosed area and presenting it with a reward. And what was the reward? That was a banana. And that was out of reach for this sultan. He placed 2 bamboo sticks inside the ape's cage, and none of the sticks were long enough to reach the banana. After some contemplation, grunting, playing with the stick, Sultan puts 2 sticks together and created a long stick to reach the banana. So this is the insight Sultan has got, right? So when the Sultan saw that he was not able to reach the banana because the sticks were small and there were 2 different sticks. So what did this ape did? It made the 2 sticks into one and made it long and tried to reach to the banana. This is what is called the insight learning. According to Gestalt school of thought, the process of insight is an organization of events such as the structural relationships in phenomenal field change in accordance with the particular phenomena. Learning is not mechanical, right? Insight is sudden, spontaneous, and there is no need for repetition, right? So it is also comes in when we are struggling with a lot of problems, right? When we keep on trying, right, with whatever given solutions that we have, exploring multiple ways of trying to solve the problem, suddenly we develop an insight and it could be spontaneous. Okay. So that is what is all about Haller's insight learning. Okay. So with this, we move on to the next, Bandora's observational learning. Now, Albert Bandura, 1973, he contributed key contributions was his explanations of how behavior can be acquired in the absence of reinforcement. So he was a sociologist, a philosopher too, and he was given his contribution is how behavior can be reinforced even in the absence of reinforcement or rewards. He theorized mechanism by which people can learn simply by watching others perform a behavior. This is called observational learning. The two important postulates according to Bandura's widely spoken about social learning theory are mediating processes occurs between stimuli and response. Number two, behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observation and learning. Now, what is this mediating processes? Bandura's approach is regarded as the bridge between the traditional learning theory, that is the behaviorism, and cognitive approach. This is because it focuses on how cognitive factors are involved in learning. Unlike Skinner, Bandura yeah, believes that the humans are active information processors and think about relationship between the behavior and the consequences. So there are four mediation processes proposed by Bandura. Okay, so his whole focus is on observation. He says we learn by observing people, by modeling, by looking at how they behave. You know what? And also he says that how our thought process are constantly stimulating us to think. Right? So there are four mediation processes proposed by Bandura. The first one is attention. Now, what is attention? The extent to which we are exposed to or notice the behavior. For a behavior to be imitated, it has to grab our attention. In other words, our senses have to be focused. We observe many behaviors on daily basis, and many of these are noteworthy. Attention is therefore extremely important to whether a behavior has influence on others and imitating it. Now you see children, how well they are imitating, right? They see how their mothers are putting their makeup, how they carry their handbags. Or if they are guys, small children, boys, they imitate their fathers, like how they walk or maybe wear on their shoes. Or sometimes they imitate how they talk. So all this has come from, they're giving so much attention on observing how their parents behave or observing how others are behaving. And they try to model. So the whole process of behavior comes through observation by giving attention to, by using the sense organs, like how they look at the way a person is behaving, how they listen to how they are speaking, how they are communicating. So all this, is absorbed by them and they observe it and that becomes a part of the learning. So attention is a very important thing when talk about this learning, right? Second aspect is retention. Retention is what? The behavior may be noticed, right? But may not always be remembered, which subsequently prevents imitation. It is important, therefore, that a memory of behavior is formed in order to be performed later by observer. Even if the behavior is reproduced shortly after seeing it, there needs to be a memory to refer it, right? So now when we study so much, sometimes we may not able to remember, but when we really study attentively, putting all things aside, writing down and trying to recall and talking about what we learn, what happened? We are able to retain what we learn. So that is what is called retention, where we are paying a lot of attention to learn and then we are storing that in the memory and that gets retained so that when we require, especially when we want to give back, like when we want to write during the examination time, if we have good retention power, it comes back to us to be able to remember and write. Number 3, reproduction. What is reproduction? This is the ability to perform the behavior that the model has just demonstrated. We see much behavior on a daily basis that we would like to be able to imitate. But this is not always possible. We are limited of physical ability, and for that reason, we wish to reproduce the behavior, but we cannot. Okay. So we give a lot of attention, and then whatever we observe are being retained, and whatever attention has been given to whatever is retained, we are able to reproduce, right? So we see much of the behavior, in the daily lives, we'll be able to imitate, okay? To some extent, we are able to imitate and reproduce, but we cannot reproduce everything about how a person behaves. Yeah. So number 4, motivation. What is motivation? This is the will to perform the behavior. The reward and the punishment that follows the behavior will be considered by the observer. If the perceived rewards outweigh the perceived cost, like if there are any, then the behavior will be more likely be imitated by the observer. If the vicarious reinforcement does not seem to be important enough to the observer, they will not imitate the behavior. So let's take an example of a child. If the child is studying very well, and that we are, maybe trying to reward the child by giving something to the child, by acknowledging the child's behavior. So there is all possibility the child will be motivated to repeat that behavior, to study again, to do that homework every day, right? So when the child doesn't get reward, doesn't get reinforced, what happens? Slowly, the motivation can go down, right? So this is what about motivation. Observational learning. What is observational? Cannot occur unless cognitive processes are at work. So cognitive process, that is the thought processes, the thinking process that has to be at work. Only when the observational learning can happen. These mental factors mediate, that is, intervene in the learning process to determine whether or not a new response should be acquired. Therefore, individuals do not automatically observe the behavior of a model and imitate it. There is some thought prior to the imitation and is considered is as called the mediation processes. Like, so even if you look at the children, they just don't immediately imitate or think. There is a kind of a thought that goes through, even before, even when they're using the sense perception to look at the person, right? So the cognitive processes are work. Okay, so these mental factors helps them to mediate. So this is what is all observational learning. Now, Bandura illustrated this by observational learning through his famous Bobo-doll experiment. This is a very popular experiment of Albert Bandura. So he, along with his colleagues, conducted a series of studies on observational learning of aggressive behavior of children by children. The children watched a film that showed an adult behaving aggressively towards an inflated plastic ball. He was punching, hitting, kicking, and hammering on the Bobo doll. So children who saw the aggressive behavior were more likely to behave aggressively when they are later allowed to play with themselves. Children who saw aggressive adults being rewarded behaved aggressively. Conversely, the children who saw the adult punished were less likely to behave aggressively. However, children saw the unrewarded aggression were later more aggressive than children who saw the same adult model displayed in neutral behavior. The observational learning did not require observation of the reward. Just seeing the aggressive behavior itself was enough for the children enough to for enough for children to learn it. Now you see there is also studies done when children are watching too much on the television, a lot of aggression, a lot of dishum fights, no? So there is a tendency that they are also becoming aggressive because they are watching so much, right? Because the media, the film, the displays, like, the hitting and, being violent is the right way to express anger. So these are also observed by the children, right? So similarly, Bobo doll experiment is related to that, which Albert Bandura has experimented. Individuals that are observed called as models. These models serve as example behavior to observe and imitate. Children pay attention to some of these people, that is the models, and encode their behavior. At a later time, they will imitate the behavior. They observe that they do this regardless of whether the behavior is appropriate or not. So it is very easy for the children and the young people to get, to be able to look at the model and imitate. Like one of the popular personalities, like, all the film stars, maybe Salman Khan, Shah Rukh Khan, or Mahesh Babu, like, children get attracted, even young youth get attracted, and they want to model them. So whether their behavior is appropriate or not, but just observing them, they look at them and they take them as models because they like them, because they are hero material or heroine material, and they want to model, right? So, and they imitate it, regardless behavior is whether the behavior is appropriate or not, right? So like that, there is so many kind of inappropriate behaviors also shown in the films or shown in the TV serials, But when they like somebody, when they are able to, really become crazy behind this particular model, they start imitating. Okay, so child is more likely to attend and imitate, yeah, when it perceives as similar to itself. The child will also take into account what happens to other people when deciding whether to copy or not or copy someone's action. A person learns by observing the consequences of another person, that is the model's behavior. A younger sister observing an older sister being rewarded for a particular behavior is more likely to repeat the behavior itself. This is known as the vicarious reinforcement. So here they gave an example of an older sister, right? Maybe the older sister is very good at dancing and then everybody is clapping hands for her. The younger sister feels, that she also must be able to model like the older sister so that she also can be appreciated and everybody can even clap for her. Okay. So children will have number of models with whom they identify. They may have people, the immediate world, such as parents, older siblings, or could be a fantasy character or people in the media. The motivation to identify with a particular model is that they have quality which the individuals would like to possess. Identification occurs with another person that involves taking in or adopting observed behaviors, values, beliefs, attitudes of the person with whom they are identifying. Okay, right. So now we come to the Tolman's cognitive learning. Now, what is this Tolman's cognitive learning? Let's look at it. Edward Tolman thought of learning as a developing form of cognition about environment and how organisms relate to it. He conducted several classical experiments on rats, one which is the maze running. He examined the role that reinforcement plays in the ways that the rats learned their way through complex mazes. These experiments eventually led to the theory of latent learning. That is, learning occurs in the absence of obvious reward. Okay. So in 1929, one of the first experiments was conducted to demonstrate the paradigm of learning without the reward. Right? Now, how did he do it? So he conducted 3 groups of rats were trained. Okay. 3 groups of rats were trained to run on a maze. The control group 1 was fed upon reaching the goal. The first experiment group. The group number 2 was not rewarded for the first 6 days of training, but found food in the goal on the day 7 and every day thereafter. The second experiment group 3 was not rewarded for the first 2 days, but found food in the goal on day by 3 and every day thereafter. Both the experimenters group demonstrated fewer errors when running the maze the day after the transition from no reward or reward condition had taken place. The marked performance continued throughout the rest of the experiment. So this suggested that the rats had learned during the initial trials of no reward and were able to use a cognitive map of the maze when rewards were introduced. The initial learning that occurred during the no reward trials was what Tolman referred to as latent learning. He argued that humans engage in the type of learning every day as we drive, walk on the same route daily and learn the location of various buildings and objects. Only when we need to find a building or object does learning becomes obvious. Controversy developed from Tolman's theory of latent learning, but several investigators demonstrated that the rats do learn in the absence of rewards. Tolman identified himself as a behaviorist and eschewed the type of introspection that was practiced by Woodard and Tishner. However, he also opposed to the behavior of Watson. He was known for initiating his own kind of behaviorism, which he referred to as purposive behaviorism. This idea of purposive or molar behaviorism sought to demonstrate that the insights were not restricted to evolutionary capabilities of the apes. He strongly advocated to theorizing at the molar level, which was demonstrated by several studies showing that the rats learn that about the place where they have been rewarded rather than the particular moments required to get there. These studies also support Tolman's stand that learning did not involve the strengthening of connection between stimuli or response or conditioning learning. To illustrate purposive behavior in rats, Tolman used an apparatus shown in the figure below. Right, you can check in your books, your textbook, Tolman's rat maze. There's a diagram given. A starting the box, B was the goal. A hungry rat learned to run to B very quickly without hesitation. Tolman wondered what was learned when this occurred. One explanation was that the rat had learned the response turning right, which led to the food. However, Tolman preferred the explanation that the rat had developed a cognitive map of the maze and where the place of the reward was located. A test was developed to determine the right answer. Once they had learned how to run from A to B, it started at C. The stimulus response explanation predicted the rat would run right and reach the D. The cognitive map explanation predicted that the rat would reach the reward B. The test demonstrated that most of the rats reached B, thereby leading Tolman to conclude that a cognitive map was most likely developed by rats in maze running. Tolman is regarded as a pioneer in cognitive psychology during a time when behaviorists dominated the field. He classified a cognitive behavior today and the originator of cognitive theory. Cognitive maps were the precursors to concepts of spatial memory and spatial thinking. Okay, so this is all about Tolman. Okay, and then, okay, by this we are able to, we are able to complete the unit 1. Okay, so you have a summary here, and then even to check your progress, you have on your page in which the learning has been defined, right? And all that we just, and all the theories, like Pavlov's classical conditioning, Thorndike's this one theory, and Albert Bandura's operant condition, B.F. Skinner. Everything is given as a summary. You also have the model questions, right? In which, there is define learning and describe the nature of learning, which you have already studied. You should be able to, you read the textbook, the content is very good. It has been prepared very well. So if you are able to look at it and read it, you will have a better understanding. And then there is question, explain Bandura's observation learning. When you get this question, you look at Albert Bandura's social learning theory, okay, how observations model and all that we spoke about, you can write it, right? And then in the Roman number 2, you have 20 lines questions in which you have asked, explain Pavlov's classical conditioning, right? It is very simple and easy. You can even show it diagrammatically, right? About conditional response, unconditional response, and then stimulus response, before, after, and during, right? So with that, you should be able to write about Pavlov's conditioning. Even if you write in own words, if you are able to depict in a diagram and explain, like, how Ivan Pavlov conducted this experiment and how he came out with this theory of classical conditioning, right? It will be good enough. And then briefly describe Thorndike Skinner's learning theory, which we have already learned of, how Thorndike thinks about reinforcement and all that stuff. Then you have a glossary here behind, in 1.8, where everything is been, the meanings are explained, like behaviorism, what is it? It's a learning approach to psychology introduced by Watson that emphasizes on observable behavior. And then what is classical conditioning? A learning process that occurs when two stimuli are repeatedly paired with. This pairing involved unconditional stimulus and unconditional response, conditional stimulus and unconditional response. Then cognitive learning theory, what is it? A theory that defines learning as a behavioral change based on the acquisition of information and environment. Cognitive map, a mental representation of one's physical environment, right? We all can develop this cognitive map, right? We are all prone to, right? Discrimination, which is recognition and understanding of the difference between one thing and another. Generalization, the tendency to respond to the same way to the stimuli of the same modality. Then higher order conditioning, also known as the second order conditioning, classical conditioning term, refers to a situation in which the stimulus that was previously neutral is paired with the conditioned stimulus. And then we have the insight learning, right, which is immediate and clear learning or understanding that takes place without over trial or error testing. And then latent learning, which occurs without any obvious reinforcement of behavior or associations that are known. Law of effect, any behavior that is followed by pleasant consequences is likely to be repeated. And any behavior followed by unpleasance is likely to be stopped. That is the law of effect. Learning, any relatively permanent change in behavior that occurs as a relative results of practice and experience. Observational learning, a modeling, a type of learning most associated with the work and social learning theory of Albert Bandura. Conditioning, operant conditioning means changing of behavior by the use of reinforcement, which is given after a desired response. Reinforcement, action or process of strengthening a response. Response generalization, the act or the process of responding to a stimuli similar to but distinct from a conditional stimulus. Spontaneous recovery, the reappearance of a response, a conditioned response that has become extant. Trial and error learning, a fundamental method of learning which is characterized by repeated, varied attempts which are continued until success is arrived or until the subject stops trying. Vicarious learning, learning that is derived from indirect sources or without complete attention. Okay, so with this, we complete this unit 1. And then we have our next class on 14th and 15th. And then I will continue. And sorry for this PowerPoint that I've been having some technical. Let me try again. I'll ask some help now and see if at least now if I'm able to upload. Actually, I asked the admin to help me out, but I have not got any response. Okay. 1 minute. Just give me a minute. I'm trying now. If I can upload since I finished it. I apologize for this. Let me see if I can upload it now. You all can see it, and it will get loaded in the website also. You have to take screenshots. Not the host here. Can you? I'm the co-host. I don't know why it is not getting. You're the co-host here. I need you to be the co-host here. Vinod wants to say. Hello? Madam, please unmute. Yeah, I unmuted.
Yeah, 1 second.
I unmuted.
Ayyo. You got out of this thing.
Can you see my PowerPoint, Ma? Can somebody tell me? Please unmute and let me know. Can you see? Because my daughter helped me to set this right.
It's happening. Wait. Oh, they're muted.
Do you have to do it?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yeah.
I hope you are able to hear me.
Yes, yes. Now, can you see? I tried to share I had a lot of technical glitches and I tried to contact the BROU, but now my daughter is trying to help me out. So I'm trying to share the screen now so that I can upload this PowerPoint here.
Something is coming, but not started coming. It is showing that you are something.
Yes, yes. It is buffering. I can see that on.
Yeah.
You can take one of the contact numbers and send them the.
Yeah. Otherwise, you just send me your Gmail ID or something. I will. I'll send a PowerPoint to all of you. You put your Gmail ID in the chat box. I will note it down in a pen. Somebody put, one person can take it and share with your friends.
Okay, put the number.
Or
Gmail ID. Okay, you can. Yeah, okay. Just tell them you'll be
okay, I will send this mail to KAL. There's one more also. Okay, I'll note down.
No, you can't send it. I think one can download it and share it on your group to each other. Is that possible?
Also, I will send it to the university. They'll upload in the website also, they said.
Ma'am, you send to anyone. He will share. He or she will share to us all. Anyone
Sorry?
email ID will send. No problem.
No problem. Okay. So I will send to one person and then you share. I will send right away.
Sure.
Sorry for this inconvenience. I'll just see the Gmail open. I have sent to all three of you. Can you please check your mail? Okay, you all got it now? So I'll see how this can get uploaded. I will send it to our sir. Okay, so kindly share it with the others. Okay, so thank you for listening, and I will continue the session next week with the unit 2. Okay, it's not very difficult if you go through the textbook. The very simple language has been used and very clearly explained. Yeah, I'm not able to unmute you all because I have only control on my mute and unmute. Okay.
Okay, madam. Thank you.
Now I can hear you all. Okay. Okay, then thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ma'am. Bye.
Bye.